Only days away from week one, and there's still some opportunities to get some players that are on your team, maybe off your team. I'm bringing you 4 players that you should be selling high right now, just selling in general before week one, based on some things I'm going to be bringing to you today. So make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. If any questions, start, sit, trade questions that you have down below. Let's see if we can get to 150 likes. With your help, I think we can. I believe it. Let's go straight into my first player. Start off with the tight end position. This one's a bit controversial here, but that is George Kittle. Look, tight end position, depending on where you're tight end premium or not. I think if you're in tight end premium, maybe you can disregard this. But if you're in a regular premium or just non-tight end premium league, I think George Kittle could be somebody that you should be able to trade away right now high and maybe acquire maybe a lower tier tight end and then maybe acquire a higher tier wide receiver or running back. So let's talk about it. George Kittle obviously has success in his career. If we really look back in his career, since 2017, tight end 20, 2018, tight end 3, 2019, tight end 2, 2020, tight end 19, 2021 tight end 4, 2022 this past year tight end 3. We all know how volatile the tight end position is. Every single year is up or down, boom or bust, whatever the case may be on a week to week basis. And you have to understand that this can be an opportunity for you to sell someone like a George Kittle who just had a phenomenal season as a tight end 3. But one of the things I really want to bring to your attention is this offense, right? You look at this offense, you look at everyone that's on this team. Brock Purdy is a starter going into week one. He is a starter for this year. Obviously, if he does not get injured, then we have some new conversations. But when you look at this offense, you really need to find out and think about who is a true priority on this offense. First, you think of CMC, who they just traded for this past year, who is a monster on the ground and in the air. Deebo Samuel, right? You think of Deebo, who just had another great year, coming off of a previous great year before. Then you think of Brandon Ayuk, who was a top 15 wide receiver this past year. Then you think of George Kittle, who is the 4th option on this team. I think that's exactly where I kind of want to pivot off of. And yeah, you're probably saying, well, he finished tight end 3, right? This past year, he had 60 receptions, 86 targets, just over 700 yards, 11 touchdowns. That is the biggest kicker here. 11 touchdowns. It was averaging over 13 fantasy points per game, finished as a tight end 3. When you score 7 out of 11 touchdowns in the second half with Brock Purdy, I don't think that is something that we can really lean on, right? Okay, that is, if you really extrapolate that in his stats in that second half of the season, he was on pace for 29 touchdowns in the last 4 weeks of the season. Obviously, that is not perfect and that is absurd. That's why that extrapolation is not perfect. But what I really did is that I broke down, every single game, because I think there was his opportunities were very miscued in the second half of the season, especially when Brock Purdy was there. So what I did is that I went through from weeks 3 to 17, where George Kittle has started all the games in this past year. And you're going to be seeing on your screen, there is a pink, green, and orange. Okay, pink, as you can probably see on your screen now, all these pink ones, out of the 6 ones that are highlighted, those are all the players, every single player that did play for the 49ers or the offensive snaps for the 49ers, and Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, either in Jeff Wilson or CMC at the premium positions, right? Those are that did not finish in the top 10. So there are 6 times that George Kittle did not finish in the top 10 with all 4 players. Once again, Brandon Ayuk, CMC, Deebo Samuel, or Jeff Wilson, the first half of the season, that didn't finish as a top 10 finish, wide receiver or tight end. All the ones in the green where he finished as a top 6 tight end those weeks. There were 4 times where he finished with all 4 players as a top tight end that week. In week 6, week 7, week 11, and also week 8. Okay, I did count week 8 in the orange categories where one player was injured. So the orange categories meaning there was one player that was injured in that offense, whether it was Deebo CMC, Deebo CMC or Brandon Ayuk, where George Kittle finished in the top 6, and that was 4 weeks where we saw George Kittle finish as a top 6 tight end with one player missing. Look, I think that, not that I think, I truly believe when I look coming into this season, especially where George Kittle is currently getting drafted. He's getting drafted in the 5th round. I would rather try and sell George Kittle high to a person who maybe he's a 49ers fan, maybe who believes in George Kittle, who believes in Brock Purdy, that you can pivot off of. And maybe you can get a Dallas Goedert 2 rounds later. Maybe you can get a David Njoku 3 rounds later. Maybe you can get a Pat Freiermuth 2 rounds later, or Evan Ingram 5 rounds later. That's a type of opportunity and type of things that I'm thinking of when I think of George Kittle, because here's the people that are going around him. Right, and one of our latest mock draft: Miles Sanders, Chris Godwin, Justin Herbert, Kenneth Walker, J.K. Dobbins, Javonte Williams, Dameon Pierce, Tyler Lockett, Jahan Dotson. Those are some players going around George Kittle right now that I would rather pivot off of, or I would rather have on my team than have George Kittle if I can pivot. So, for example, if I can send George Kittle away and I get a Jahan Dotson and an Evan Ingram, I think somebody would do that if they have the wide receiver depth. Maybe I'm crazy, maybe I'm not. Maybe I can trade away George Kittle and acquire Pat Freiermuth and get someone like a Terry or someone like a I don't know, Jordan Addison, a Zay Flowers, a Sky Moore, who I believe has a good longer season outlook. Maybe what if that's a Brandon Cooks, right? Maybe you get a Pat Freiermuth and a Brandon Cooks and you send away George Kittle, because Brandon Cooks is a wide receiver 2 and Pat Freiermuth is a 3rd option on his team. However way you want to put it together, I think George Kittle, he is going to have the boom and bust games. Let me not discount that whatsoever. He is going to have the boom and bust games where he's going to be scoring 25 plus fantasy points one week where he is top 3 tight end, and then he's going to another week where he probably only got 2 targets because of the 3 other people that demand targets on his team: Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, and CMC. So once again, this is a player that I'm trying to pivot off of right now that I can try and acquire, right? Here's another thing that you can think about. Can you pivot to someone in a higher tier? Can you send a George Kittle and maybe send another player to acquire a Mark Andrews, or someone to acquire someone like a Darren Waller? Those are the type of things that I'm looking at and thinking about when I think of trying to sell George Kittle. So comment down below. Let me know what you think about George Kittle and if you are willing to pivot off him before week 1. Let's get straight into my second player here. My second player that I'm trying to sell high right now is Chris Godwin. Look, as much as I love Chris Godwin, I trust in his talent. I don't trust in Baker Mayfield's talent. Currently, right now, Chris Godwin is getting drafted around sometimes I've seen him going at the end of round 4, but early round 5 in our latest mock draft. Our latest real draft. And sometimes he goes later, depending on your league, how people view Chris Godwin. But one of the things I keep thinking of is the fantasy finishes that Baker Mayfield has had with, a phenomenal team in the past since 2018. Jarvis Landry, it was only one season where Baker Mayfield has had a top 15 finish, and that was in 2019 when Jarvis Landry finished as the wide receiver 12 and OBJ finished as the wide receiver 25, okay? The year after that, 2020, Jarvis Landry, wide receiver 33. 2021, Jarvis Landry, wide receiver 52. Obviously, Odell Beckham was even later. He tore his ACL one year, so I didn't want to count him. In 2018 was Baker Mayfield's rookie year. So his sophomore year, he does produce a top 15 wide receiver, but he doesn't really follow up with one of the best offensive lines, arguably one of the best offensive line, the best running backs in the backfields. And I know a lot of people are going to say, well, this is a run that at the time was a run-heavy offense. But this offense is a pass-heavy offense, at least with Tom Brady was this past year. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers were a top 3 passing offense last year in 2022. So either we see a significant change where this is a run-heavy offense and we don't see Baker Mayfield throw the ball as much as Tom Brady did, which I doubt he is going to do. But I am saying if I can trade Chris Godwin away now and pivot to somebody I believe has a higher, longer season production, I would do that right now. These are plays, once again, I'm trying to sell before week 1. Maybe Baker Mayfield does have a phenomenal game, right? I mean, I know the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are playing, I forgot who they play, but they are playing a team that gives up a lot of points to the wide receiver position. I just did that video a couple of days ago. I'm trying to think of, maybe I can think of it as I'm talking about it. But yes, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I do not want to really lean on them, especially Baker Mayfield coming into week 1. So if I can pivot to any other of these wide receivers, they play the Minnesota Vikings. There you go. The Minnesota Vikings, who gave the second most fantasy points to the wide receiver position last year, I understand. They gave up a lot of points because the defense is atrocious. The defense didn't get any good. So maybe he has a good week 1, and maybe you can trade him after week 1. But still, I'm trying to pivot off right now. Here are some players going around Chris Godwin that just went in one of our recent drafts, okay? Chris Godwin, Justin Herbert, right? Kenneth Walker, J.K. Dobbins, Javonte, Damian Pierce, Tyler Lockett, Deontay Johnson, George Pickens, Christian Kirk. Honestly, it sounds crazy. I'm a big Elijah Moore guy. You guys know that. Can I get Elijah Moore and some more for Chris Godwin? Can I get someone like a Jordan Addison for Chris Godwin? Can I get a Jackson Smith-Njigba and more for Chris Godwin? Can I get a James Cook and a little bit more for Chris Godwin? Can I get a Pat Fryermuth and a little bit more for Chris Godwin? I would rather tier significantly lower down and to acquire someone to get Chris Godwin off my hands, right? David Njoku. I think of Sky Moore. I think of Zay Flowers, Brandon Cooks. There are so many people I personally would rather have in the long run in 2023 than Chris Godwin. This may be a little bit harsh. I still love Chris Godwin as a talent. I think he's a phenomenal dynasty asset coming into the 2024 season, because I do believe this team might be tanking for Caleb Williams. But as of right now, I am trying to get Chris Godwin off of my team as much as possible. Before I get into my next player, go to flockfantasy.com/land, the best place to support what Zach and I are doing here. You want in-season rankings, weekly in-season rankings. I'm going to be updated by myself and Zach and all the other content creators. Do you want a personal DM with Zach and myself that can help you set your lineups week in and week out? flockfantasy.com/land. Use promo code LAND. Not only that, you get our articles, dynasty rankings, our in-season rankings, our bonus content, our articles, so much more that you can get on the site, not only from Zach and myself, but all the other content creators on the website. So once again, flockfantasy.com/land, the best place to support what Zach and I are doing here. And let's get straight into my next player. All right, let's go into my next player here that you should be trying to sell before week 1 of the season, and that is Raheem the Dream Mostert. Look, I know Jeff Wilson is on IR. I think a lot of people are rising, Raheem in his rankings. Maybe you just drafted him in one of your late round drafts, but do you truly believe in the long run, maybe in the second half of the season, and maybe you didn't draft him for a full 16, 17 game slate. Maybe you drafted him for the first 4 weeks because Jeff Wilson's gone, but I don't believe that is going to last even for the first 4 weeks. When you think of this offense, especially when you think of Raheem Mostert, who has dealt with significant injury history, but you think of this backfield and this depth chart, right? Before I get into the injury history, you think of the depth chart with Devon Achane, who was dealing with an injury in preseason. As I'm recording this video, we're not necessarily sure if he's going to be ready for week 1, but if he is, that's great. But if he's not, then I do envision this team bringing in somebody else off the street, like a Kareem Hunt, like a Leonard Fournette. Let's not forget that Jonathan Taylor was the front runner up for the Miami Dolphins, according to reports that he was going to be coming to this team if they can get a deal done, which that didn't happen. Even if that does happen, Raheem Dream's value is going to plummet. I think that Raheem is going to be one of the most dropped running backs in the league if Jonathan Taylor does get traded to the Miami Dolphins in 2023. Now, I want to go back to the injury history with Raheem Mostert. He has an 85% chance of missing at least the second half of the season, according to DraftShark. If you look at the injury history with Raheem Mostert, you can go through all the injury histories: the MCL sprain, the concussions, the shoulder, the hamstrings, the knees, the ankles. Everything for Raheem is not trending in the right way, especially when you think of someone who has dealt with injury and who has missed who is an older running back, a 31-year-old running back who in his career has averaged in a season 8.4 games per season. Since 2015, Raheem Mostert has been averaging 8.5 games in a full single season, and that's not necessarily somebody I want to be leaning on. Yes, Raheem is going to have 15 points one game, and then 15, 20 plus points one game, and then 2 points, and then you're going to say, damn, well, I should have sold Raheem when he was high. That's what's going to happen. You're going to have to sell him high, and I think you should sell him now, because I don't believe his value is going to rise even more. Hypothetically, if you can sell Raheem right now for player X, if Raheem in week 1 goes, let's say 22 points because he has 100 yards, he rushed a ball for 17, and he scored a touchdown or 2 touchdowns, is his value going to rise even higher than player X? No, because Raheem's a 31-year-old running back, where Jeff Wilson is still coming back, and this team still has the opportunity to get Jonathan Taylor in the middle of the season. So if you can sell Raheem Mostert, I am going to. And here are some players that we're going around to, once again, in our latest draft, that you can go out and try and get. What about a Romeo Doubs, who has a higher upside throughout the season? I think of a Jalen Warren, who I like is a lot as well. Rashad Bateman. What about Darnell Mooney and Ezekiel Elliott? These are some players I would be trading away who I believe have a higher upside throughout the season than Raheem Mostert, especially with the situation being able to change week in and week out. So if I were you, I would be selling Raheem as soon as possible. My last player that I believe you should be selling high before week 1, or maybe just pivoting at any point in time, and I think a lot of the fantasy community will agree, and that is Hollywood Brown. Look, Hollywood Brown is coming into a year where I think he can get traded maybe in the middle of the season. I think we have been talking about Mike Evans, Devontae Adams. I think Hollywood Brown could be a trade candidate for this Arizona Cardinals team in the middle of the season before the trade deadline. I will not be surprised, especially the way this team is trending with all the reports coming out of camp. Now, the biggest caveat here is who the hell is going to be the quarterback week 1. As I'm recording this video, we do not know who the starting quarterback is, whether that is Josh Dobbs or Clayton Tune. Now, whoever that is, are you comfortable starting Hollywood Brown week 1? Absolutely not. I don't want to start Hollywood Brown whatsoever, especially when they're going against the Washington Commanders, who were the middle pack defense this past year. I think gave up the 15 least amount, 15 least or 15 most, however way you want to see it. That's why I say middle of the pack. Fantasy points to the wide receiver position. But once again, who the hell is the quarterback going to be? Now you're probably thinking, well, maybe it's not the right time to sell Hollywood because of Kyler Murray. Once again, is Hollywood Brown even going to be on this team in the second half of the season? Now, his situation can change and get quote unquote better if he does get traded, to the Bills, the Jets, the Giants, whatever team that doesn't have a questionable quarterback outside of Kyler Murray right now. Hollywood Brown could obviously be a value in the second half of the season. This past year in 2021, finished wide receiver 23. He had a good run in the first 6 weeks of the season where he was averaging 18 fantasy points per game for weeks 1 to 6, and then he was missing from week 7 to 11, and then he didn't really. I think he played one game with Kyler Murray when he did come back after his injury. So look, if I were you, I'll be trying to pivot off of Marquise Brown right now. Here are some players going around him, right? Once again, I would rather take chances with some of these players than Hollywood Brown. Jordan Addison, higher upside, right? Quentin Johnston, I think, can even have a better fantasy finish than Hollywood Brown there, especially with Keenan Allen and Mike Williams having a bunch of injuries. Brandon Cooks going around later than Hollywood Brown. Elijah Moore, who would normally go a round or two later, but I took him there in the 7th, right? Sky Moore, Zay Flowers, I would rather have. What about a Treylon Burks, a Jackson Smith, and Jigba? What about a Rashad White, an Antonio Gibson, a James Cook that you can go out and try and get that I believe have, once again, a higher fantasy outlook at the end of the 2023 season. So once again, Hollywood Brown, Chris Godwin, Raheem Mostert, and George Kittle are the 4 players that I am trying to sell before the season starts. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Let's have a conversation. Let me know any comments, trade questions, questions about information about this video. Please comment down below. I'm happy to answer every single one. And as always, guys, good luck going into week 1. And it's all love.
Now that those idiots are done talking, who needs some rankings?
Hell yeah, I need some rankings.
Then use promo code LAND, L-A-N-D, for 30% off any membership at flockfantasy.com.
Oh.
It's so easy, even your grandma could scan that QR code right there.